Well, on the experience, we watched the part of the Midnight Express Road Warriors match from the Crockett Cup 1987 in Baltimore, and we discovered that the full Crockett Cup that year, or any of the Crockett Cup that year, for whatever reason, is not on the WWE Network. However, there is on the WWE Network a lot of these Saturday night World Championship Wrestling TBS programs, especially the one that we are going to be looking at today from July 12th, 1986. And this was during the Great American Bash Tour. And, we wanted to, some people asked, why didn't you watch the Road Warriors Midnight Scaffold match? Because we've talked about that ad nauseum. And also, even though it's the most famous match, to be honest, it doesn't show what any of those guys could do because it's a scaffold match and it was pure gimmick. And the finish in Baltimore at the Crockett Cup was really wild and people were into it. But a more average look at what the Midnight and the Road Warriors were doing night after night in the spot shows or in the house shows is on this program. As I said, it was from the 86 Bash tour. This was not a Bash event. This was because we were all over the country in so many different places that month. A lot of times they couldn't get back to Atlanta on a Saturday morning to do the TBS program in the studio. So they were taping the TBS programs out on the road. So this was in Raleigh, North Carolina at the Dorton Arena. And it was not a Great American Bash event, but because business was so hot and because of the card, which I'll tell you here in a minute, it did a $74,000 gate, which was the all-time record for Raleigh, North Carolina. It was a complete sellout of the Dorton Arena, which I think somewhere around 8,000 people, give or take 500 or so. And it was on, hold on here, July the 6th, 1986 was the night this actually was taped in Raleigh and then aired on the 12th. So this was a Sunday night. So that ain't bad when you can draw 8,000 people in Raleigh on a Sunday night. The complete card for this event was, in addition to the NWA World Tag Team title match, we're going to watch the Road Warriors and the Midnight Express. I won't give away the result just yet, spoiler. But also Dusty Rhodes and the Rock and Roll Express beat Ric Flair, Ole, and Arn Anderson at a bunkhouse match. Wahoo McDaniel beat Tully Blanchard, reverse decision. Magnum TA beat Nikita Koloff in a Texas death match. The Warlord beat Gene Ligon. Ronnie Garvin beat Black Bart. And Ivan Koloff beat Rocky King. And I'm pretty sure that's all the matches because they let a few of these have some time. There may have been another TV match or two. And that was the card for, this was a time where we had been running Raleigh every Wednesday night. Then we had backed up and it was only every couple of weeks, but still, a pretty decent house for that time period in that town. And I like this match because, as I said, even though this was a TV taping, we were doing TV tapings 2 or 3 nights a week in those days. It wasn't like this was a destination point. The matches weren't even promoted the previous week on the TBS program because that just wasn't the way things were done in those days. That you turned on the show, as you'll remember sometime from you watching in your younger days, you turned on the show and instead of from the studio, hey, we're in Raleigh tonight. We've got some great main events for you. Holy shit. Okay. But this was the same thing. We got to the show an hour before bell time. So you're working with the Road Warriors. Here's your finish. And we're taping for TBS tonight. So stick to your times. That was pretty much the direction we got. So it wasn't like we built this up as a huge blow-off match or a big, attraction. And also, as far as laying the match out, I don't know if people are aware of this. Raleigh was the extreme example of social distancing when it came to the wrestlers seeing each other before their matches. The babyface and heel locker rooms were on opposite sides of the building, and to get from one to the other, you had to either walk straight through the people, and it'd be obvious, so that was out, or you had to walk out the outside and walk around the building and meet in one of the abandoned little wooden ticket booths that were around the fairgrounds outside the Dorton Arena. And that wasn't a common occurrence because you still didn't want anybody to catch you. So those ticket booths were mostly used for visiting with female fans before your match. So this match was an example of what we were doing in the house shows every night, because we just went out and had our regular house show match. Dennis and Bobby called things, and, they called it as it happened. And then we did the, whatever finish we were given. We worked with the Road Warriors same way as most people did with the Warriors, especially they'd only been in the business 3 years or 4 years tops at this point. Yeah, summer of 3 years as a team and less than 4 years from when they actually broke in. Anyhow, you would do something that highlighted or accentuated their power and their strength and their mobility and their agility. For guys that size, they could do the flying shoulder tackles and drop big elbows and shit. So you would do something where you started out, looked like you were going to try to do something, but their power and strength would foil you. The heels would take big bumps and they'd bail out and let the Road Warriors fire the people up, and you'd do the regroup session, and then you would start another thing from scratch, and then you'd make that spot pay off, and you would do that till you got to the heat. The reason why there would be the stops and starts was because if you let these guys go 100 miles an hour, they would beat the shit out of you through the opening part of the match, and also because that way it could register, because Joe and Mike, neither one could do a lot of different things. They just did the things that were good for them to do. So you wanted to put all of their shit over and get the most out of the least, so that they didn't have to beat you into powder, because they could pick you up and throw you down all day. Then when you got the heat, as we mentioned on our previous watch along, if it was 2-on-1 or behind the back or a manager interference or a foreign object, they'd sell like Ricky Morton, because they knew you were going to build the fucking heat to where the people wanted to see them make the tag and the big blow for the comeback. And that was the signature of the Road Warriors match. Not only the entrance, but the big comeback at the end, and then whatever happened. So that was the formula the Midnight kind of, stuck with. And then other people started doing it that way also to get the most out of Animal and Hawk. And one more story real quick that somebody said, well, why didn't you tell a story about the Scaffold with Animal? Joe was the strongest one. Mike was strong, but Joe was cartoon strong. And so in the Scaffold match in the Omni, I knew the finish, and I knew that the only way that I was probably going to be able to get underneath that scaffold to hang on to the ladder underneath and drop without falling over the side of it head first and killing myself was if somebody that could fucking hold my bliffed ass up was holding on to me. And that's when, also Hawk had the injured leg. That's why Ellering climbed up one side and Hawk had me on the other side. I was cornered because Hawk got finished with the match. We didn't want to take another chance. But Animal was the strongest one, so he was out there and I got with him beforehand. And here was the deal we made. I said, I'm going to get down on my stomach, and when I start reaching over the side of that thing, grab my leg. And he held on to my leg like he was trying to pull me back to me, but actually he was holding on to me so I didn't fall and kill myself. And when I had a good grip on the ladder underneath, his cue to let go of me was when I screamed, "Let go of me!" Because even if the people heard that, it's what a motherfucker would be saying. And that was his cue to let go of my leg, because I knew that Joe was the only one that was strong enough to keep me up there if anything happened. So he was my last insurance policy. Once I was out of his hands, nothing could save me. But he was my last insurance policy. I didn't go head first. So anyway, so this. Oh, and I must also my costume that you will see in the opening shot of this. This was the summer of '86. Dusty had put me on color of all the programs. I did color on the Saturday night TBS show. I did color on syndication. Big Bubba, my bodyguard, was dressed up in the suit. Dusty said, kid, get one of the big wicker chairs with the big back and a Panama hat and the corsage, and you get the pitcher of lemonade, sweet tea, and you look just like you're at the plantation. So I'm all plantationed out. This was the summer of my plantation look, because he thought that Louisville, which is kind of more of a Midwestern city, was somehow somewhere around Savannah, Georgia, or Charleston, South Carolina. So that's why I'm dressed in such a fashion. Brian, you remember that, my famous Panama hat and plantation period.
I certainly do. One other note, this was a really memorable episode of the Saturday Night TBS show, because it was not just Road Warriors Midnight Express. It was, I forget if it was a bunkhouse match or a street fight match.
Yeah, no, that was the bunkhouse, Rock and Rollin' Dusty against Flair and Arn and Ole. I mean, they shot the house show and showed it, which was unusual to see these main events on free TV back then.
And like you said, you're wearing your very interesting outfit. You conducted the interviews with the heels throughout this episode. And on that note...
And by the way, it is 140 degrees in the Dorton Arena in Raleigh in July, because even though the sun had gone down, we were the main event, Midnight Road Warriors, so it's dark outside, but they started the show, it was still light. And Dorton Arena is that architectural wonder in Raleigh, where all the windows are around the whole round building, so all that sunlight pouring in, it's 100 million degrees, and the TV lights and not an empty seat. We're all ready to fucking melt when you watch this also.